Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carrie. Today I'm going to be doing the Romance Reader book tag. Okay, so I know that book tags aren't the most popular thing to do anymore, but I've really been wanting to do this one for a while. I will try to link the original book tag down below. I won't lie, I'm not very good at doing all that, but I will try. But let's go ahead and just jump right into this and get to the first question. And that is, what is your romance origin story? So the book that kind of got me into reading romance, and I have a couple. So I've always been a big reader, since I was a little kid. And I think one of the very first books that I remember my mom reading to me, and this is going to sound crazy probably to some of you who've read this book because it was way above what I should have been listening to. I think I was 5 when I started listening to this, and it was my favorite book, but it was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. And I adored that book so much as a little kid. It was kind of like a coming of age story for middle schoolers to high schoolers, and it was way above what I probably, like I said, should have been reading. But my mom read that to me, I think, every single night for a couple of years, and that kind of got me into just kind of the genre of growing up and getting older and liking boys. So that was kind of the first thing. The first actual romance book I read was probably whenever I was in high school, and I'm talking freshman year of high school, so 2004-ish, and it was Once Upon a Cowboy, and it was by Linda Warren. This is old school kind of Harlequin romance type book. I don't know if it's actually Harlequin, but it's kind of really cheesy. It's about a private investigator who falls in love with this ranch owner. Really, really cheesy, but it was so hot to me back then. That was the first smutty book I'd ever read, and I was hooked. From that time, I got into reading Harlequin books whenever I was young, high school age. And then after I got out of the Harlequin phase pretty fast, once I ran into Twilight. I know I totally did that backwards, but I totally went into smutty books, and then I found actual young adult and fell in love with Twilight. And then it was kind of all over for me. I fell into a paranormal romance kick, and I didn't get out of it for 10 years. So that's kind of my beginning story. Okay, the next question is, if you could be the heroine in a romance novel, who would be the author, and what is one trope that you'd insist to be in the story? So the author would be Fiona Cole for me. She's one of my very favorite authors, and she writes forbidden and a little more on the BDSM side. And so that would be the two trope type things that I would have to have in the book, would be definitely kind of a forbidden or taboo aspect, and definitely BDSM. I'm into the kinky shit, so that would be my kind of thing. The third question is, what is a romance you've read this year that you want more people to read? Okay, this one is easy for me, so easy. This is The Devil and the Devil's Advocate. It is a duet by Ashley Jade. I never see people talking about this on BookTube. This is one of the best books. It is different, and if you get offended easy, don't read this at all because you will be offended. It is smutty, it is forbidden, it is taboo, it is dark, it is kinky as hell, it is LGBTQ friendly. It is just perfection for me. The fourth question is, what is your favorite romance subgenre, and what subgenre have you not read much of? So I guess my favorite romance subgenre, if we're talking genre, actual genre, would probably be just contemporary. That is what I mostly read. If we're talking trope, we're talking forbidden, taboo, that kind of thing. But if we're talking actual genre, probably contemporary now. The least romance subgenre that I read is going to be historical. I hardly read any historical. The fifth question is, who is one of your auto-buy romance authors? And I cannot list just one. I can list like four off the top of my head that are like my very favorites. So Vi Keelan is definitely one. Fiona Cole, of course, like I mentioned. Penelope Douglas, absolutely. And Brittany C. Cherry, I would put those four on like the very top of my auto-buy authors. The sixth question is, how do you typically find romance recommendations? So I obviously am a YouTuber myself that talks about books and everything, so I follow a lot of my favorite booktubers and I get a lot of recommendations from them. And Goodreads, I really enjoy Goodreads. Also, I just look on Kindle Unlimited and Audible Escapes. I've been doing that a lot more recently. It's just looking to see what is new and out there. I'm trying to get some different books for you guys that maybe others haven't heard of. And I'm also kind of reading a lot of books that have been on my TBR for quite a while. So I'm reading a lot of old school romances that have been out for 5, 6, 7 years. So, but yeah, those are like the main four places would be YouTube, Goodreads, and then just looking at Kindle Unlimited and Audible Escapes. The seventh question is, what is an upcoming romance release you're excited for? So for this one, this is actually super easy for me because coming up in September is going to be Famine by Laura Thalassa. I adored Pestilence and War, and I cannot wait for Famine to come out. I really liked War, but Pestilence, which is the first book in the series, was by far my favorite. It is about the Four Horsemen. It is a fantasy romance. It is set where the Four Horsemen have come and they are going to kill the entire world because they have deemed us to be corrupt and bad, and they are just going to kill everybody. And so Pestilence comes down. He is the god of disease, and he is coming down to spread disease all over the world, and he falls in love with a human who has tried to kill him, and he does some terrible things to her in retribution of her trying to kill him. And it's really, really sad. Like, it's just heartbreaking what he puts her through, but then they like build this hate to love relationship, and it turns into this just like epic love story. And it just sounds crazy because how do you get from one to the other and it like not be like Stockholm syndrome? But it's just not. It's a beautiful story. War is kind of similar. He brings war, and it is just another beautiful story where he falls in love with a human. Of course, Famine is going to be the same thing, and I cannot wait to read his story and who he falls in love with. Question number 8 is, what is one misconception about romance you would like to lay to rest? So there's a couple. The first one being that romance isn't what it used to be. It's not all Fabio on the cover and just like old school fade to black, innocent little women should be in the kitchen 1950s. Like, that's just not what romance is at all. And I think that is still a misconception with a lot of people. Whenever I tell them that I read romance, it's like, oh, so you like those Fabio covers. No, I don't. Like, my romance is just as smutty as any porn. And it is enough to make you bawl your eyes out or to make you have all the feelings in the world. It can have an asshole hero or a cinnamon roll hero. It can be heartbreaking and beautiful and frustrating. It can have every single thing that you can imagine in a romance can be in just about any book. It can have mystery and thriller, and there's so much to romance. Another major thing is that romance can't be 5 stars. Like, that's just total bullshit. Question number 9 is, who is the most recent romance reading content creator you came across that you'd like to shout out? So I am going to shout out Makeup and Mary. I freaking adore her. She is Australian. She's badass. She is ridiculously funny. And yeah, I love her. I've been binged watched all of her booktube stuff. If you haven't checked her out, if you haven't heard of her, you've got to go look at her. I'll also link her down below. And the last question is, if someone had never read a romance before and asked you to recommend the first 3 romances that come to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? The 3 romances that I would choose are kind of all be a little bit on different levels. So the first one is going to be All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. This is a less smutty romance. It is a heartbreaker. It is a beautiful story, and I just highly recommend this to everybody, even people who don't know if they necessarily would like romance. This is one that I would highly recommend everybody read. The next book I'm going to recommend is not going to be for everybody, but it's one of my personal favorites. It's Thoughtless by S.E. Stevens. I personally think that Kellen Kyle is the #1 book husband, book boyfriend, whatever you want to call him. He's my #1. He's been my #1 since I read this. Whenever I was getting into contemporary romances, this is one of the very first books that I ever read. It stole my heart. These are not little small romance books. These are quite large. They are tiny words, and it's like 550 pages for the first book. There's 3 of them, and I read all 3 back to back. I think I had like 3 hours of sleep each night reading it. I was reading like 13 hours, 14 hours at a time. And I ended up reading all 3 books in 3 days. Could not put it down. It was so freaking good. I will say that there is trigger warnings for cheating. It is a love triangle relationship. So if that's not your thing, then this book isn't going to be for you. Another thing I'll also say about me is that I'm not a huge fan of relationships where it's a love triangle where we're reading about her being with the wrong guy. Like, I don't care if she's in a relationship with somebody else. If he's not the right guy for her, I don't really want to be reading it. Like, that's just boring to me. So I really like this because, yes, she was cheating on her boyfriend, but it was with the guy who was perfect for her. And Kellen was just the most perfect man of all time ever. I adore him so much. He is a rock star. It's a beautiful relationship that I just totally adore. So Thoughtless by S.E. Stevens is definitely going to be one of my recommendations. And the last recommendation that I have is not going to be for a single book. It's going to be for an entire series. And that's Fiona Cole's Voyeur series. This series is smutty. It is hot. It is forbidden and taboo. And it's everything that I personally love about romance. So I could not recommend this, but I would recommend the entire series. I would definitely start with the first book, that is Voyeur. It is a student-teacher romance. Voyeur is based around Voyeur, which is a sex club, and where they basically go and watch live porn. It's like a club that you've never heard of before, never will again. It is so freaking amazing and unique. I love this concept. Savior is book #2. It is about a girl who is selling her virginity for money because she is literally on her last leg. She's broke, she's poor, and she is starving to death. And so she goes off and finds a rabbit hole of how she can sell her virginity for some money. And it is an asshole romance. I love this hero so much. Alpha hole. He is just perfect in every way, but he's kind of an asshole. There is a tiny bit of cheating in this, and I would say a little bit, but I still highly recommend this one. Lovers is the 3rd book, and it is a MMF romance turned into a male-male romance. So the girl does kind of get slighted, but it is so hot. So hot. And another, which is the 4th book, is about the girl who was in the male-female relationship, the one that got slighted, and it is her relationship, and it is perfect, and Daddy Ian is just, it's not really a surprise pregnancy, but it is a pregnancy where, I guess you could call it a surprise pregnancy trope, but it is not one where it's like just thrown in at the end of a book like most people hate. It is at the very beginning of this book. It is from the prologue, and it is their relationship after finding out that she gets pregnant, and it is just perfection in every way. Like I said, Daddy Ian is just one of the hottest, most sexy, most amazing guys you could read about. I freaking love him so much. Love this book. The next book in the series is going to be Liar. This is about Kent and Olivia, and it is a uncle's best friend romance. It is an age gap romance, and it has some of the hottest sex scenes I've ever read about in a book ever. Yeah, just saying, like hottest sex scenes ever. And the last book is Teacher by Fiona Cole. This is also an age gap. This is about the owner of the club and one of the girls who is very prominent in the series, and she was previously sold into sex slavery and has a lot of hang-ups involving sex, and he is her teacher. He kind of helps her learn, and it is emotional and sweet and just adorable. I love Daniel. I think he's amazing. So I recommend the entire series, every single book. I love every single book in this series. I love Fiona Cole's writing. She's one of my favorite authors. Go check her out. Okay, so yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this. I will talk to you guys later.